In the first video on layers, we talked about some of the properties that layers could have, things like a name, whether it's current or not, and only one layer could be current. The layers could be on or off, frozen or thawed, locked or unlocked, and they could have a color assigned to them. When the color was changed, all the objects on that layer changed with it. In this one, we'll go a little bit beyond that, and I've started a new file here. And when I look at the Layer Properties dialog box, when we were in the first video, Layer Properties, I click on that, and you'll see that when you first start, you may only have one layer, and it's called Layer 0. And if you draw anything, it goes on Layer 0, and it has whatever color it has, in this case white. The line type is continuous. If we want more layers than that, let's say we're going to do a mechanical drawing, and we want to have a few layers that we didn't have in that architectural drawing. This button up here above the layer name says New Layer. It looks like a little piece of paper with a star in the upper left-hand corner. If I click on that one, it starts a new layer, creates it, and it calls it Layer 1. Let's say that I wanted a layer called Part. I'm going to put the part on that layer, and I'll have my dimensions and my title block and text on other layers. But this one, the part, will be on this layer. One of the things I can do with Layer Part is pick what color I want it to be. Let's say for whatever reason I want the part layer to be red. Then I can say OK, and now I see that layer part is red. Let's say that later on when we learn how to do dimensions, I'll have my dimensions be another color. So I could pick New Layer, and let's say that I type in the layer name is Dimensions. And Dimensions wants to be a different color than red, so let's say that I make it blue. So I'll say OK. The current layer is still Layer 0. That was the current layer when we started the drawing, and we haven't changed that part of it yet. So I have a couple of ways I can change the current layer. One we said before was to select the layer by clicking on it and then pick the green check mark. Another way that's a little simpler is just double-click on the name of the layer, and it makes it the current layer. So layer part is red, it's the current layer. If I close this dialog box and then draw some simple objects, I'll see that the new objects that I draw are red. If I then wanted to change to a different layer, another way of changing to it is use this drop down and pick the layer name that I want, in this case Dimensions, and draw some more objects. And now these are blue because they're on the dimension layer. Once I've created these objects, I could go back and turn off the part layer by using on-off or freeze-thaw. If I go to do that to the current layer, if I say off to the current layer, it comes up with a warning and says, are you sure you want to turn the current layer off? If I say yes, the current layer is now turned off. This is never a good idea, because if I go to draw anything now, I'll start drawing, and it looks like I'm drawing, and it looks like everything's fine except for the fact nothing's showing up. So the question would be, do you think that it's actually working or not working? One way to tell would be to go back and turn that layer on, and it turns out this is the new stuff I just drew, so yes, indeed, it did work. I just couldn't see it. This is, like I say, never a good idea to have the current layer turned off. One question that might come up is, what if I want to edit something in one layer with something that's on another? Let's say that I drew a line through this circle, and now I want to trim off part of the circle. Can I use something that's on layer Dimensions to trim something that's on layer Part? Well, let's try it. If I say Trim, on the command line it says to select the cutting edges, and I want to use the line as the cutting edge. I'm done selecting cutting edges, so I hit Enter, and when it says to select the object to trim, I'll pick something on a different layer, in this case Part, and it sure does work. So just so you can see here, you can edit things with the modify commands even though they're on different layers. Another thing that might come up is, can I use an object snap, let's say an intersection between something on one layer and another? If I say give me a line, I have my object snap turned on, and I'll say at the intersection of those two objects, and it did find it. So even though they're on different layers, you can modify them, you can find object snaps with them. That all works. Just to reiterate, if I wanted to change something from one layer to another, let's say I picked several of these red objects. If I then used the drop down here for Dimensions, I'd move them, and now they're on the Dimensions layer, right? And again, if I wanted to change the color of these, I can go back to the Layer Properties dialog box, pick the layer color that I wanted to change, in this case my blue layer. Let's say that I made it green, and said OK. It's now green here, and when I close it, all of the objects that were blue come out green. If I wanted to change the line type of a layer, I have to go back to the Layer Properties dialog box, and you'll see that let's say that we want a centerline layer. I'll create a new layer where it says New, and let's say that I call this one Layer Center. Layer Center, I could change the color of it so it's not the same as these other layer colors. This one is magenta, kind of that purplish color. And then to the right of that, it has what line type do I want. Continuous just means no breaks. There are no gaps in the line type. If I click on the layer line type, where it says continuous, another dialog box shows up and allows me to pick from all of the line types that exist in the dialog box. Unfortunately, in this case, there is only one called continuous. So I need to get more line types into this dialog box, and that we accomplish by clicking on the Load button. If I click on Load, it opens up this yet another dialog box where it says Load or Reload line types. I can see I have a bunch called AutoCAD ISO with a bunch of numbers. If I drag the slider down far enough, I'll see that there's a line type called Center. When I click on Center and then say OK, that loaded it into the dialog box, but it did not select it. I still need to select it and then say OK, and now Layer Center happens to have a line type called Center. The two don't have to match. In this case, I just picked the same thing. Now, if I make Layer Center the current layer, I double-clicked on it and close the dialog box. When I go to Draw New Lines, they will be on Layer Center. They'll be that magenta color, and they show up with centerline line types. So you need to load line types if they're not already loaded into your drawing, assign them to the layer you want them on, and then when you draw on that layer, they show up. If you change to the line type of an existing layer that had things already drawn on it, the line type would change for the existing objects in your drawing also. We'll talk about layer scale a little bit later as far as scaling the line types, but this is a good start for our layers. You can create brand new layers. You can have as many layers in a drawing as you need to have to keep your drawing organized the way you want it to. And you can, again, turn them on, off, freeze thaw, lock, unlock, make one current, change the color, and change the line type.